Some people estimate that Shakespeare has written around 118,000 lines. That includes about 38 plays and over 150 poems. And yet, despite the great wealth of material to choose from, if you asked any random individual on the street to quote Shakespeare, most would pick the same line. You know which one.
To be or not
To be.
That one. So what does it take to be Hamlet? And why is that one line so important? Coming at approximately 1,506 lines, Hamlet's dialogue is actually the longest Shakespeare has ever written for a character. The Soliloquy, which begins with the lines "to be or not to be," opens up the third act and has achieved something of a mythical status among actors and readers alike. One could argue that the Soliloquy is the heart of who Hamlet is, of what he represents. The question posed is not just one of whether Hamlet should go ahead with his revenge or not, but delves deeper into perhaps the most integral questions to mankind itself. Why are we here? And what comes next? Today, we will look at 3 different Hamlets. We will focus specifically on how they engage with his monumental monologue, and how each of them has tried to make it their own. First, we will begin with David Tennant, who portrayed Hamlet in the 2008 BBC production, later made for television in 2009. At the time, David Tennant was possibly the quintessential British star. Having risen to fame in the hit sci-fi show Doctor Who, he was perhaps one of the most recognizable Hamlets of the modern time. The Guardian reviewed the play, saying that on stage, David Tennant's performance had demonic energy. Slant magazine said that his Hamlet, with his quiet, tight lips and gigantic brown eyes, genuinely seems like a lost person.
By a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation.
To begin this soliloquy, this version of Hamlet looks all but defeated. When he contemplates the unthinkable, there is a hint of relief in his voice. But as Tennant speaks these words, something changes. And as questions turn to resolutions, the uncertainty in his face bubbles into a sneer, pushing forward the subtle hints of Tennant's unhinged fury.
If you of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought.
Tennant's Hamlet and his soliloquy is remarkable for the way it indicates the shift in Hamlet. At one time he is a roaring tempest, at another a ponderous, murky black sea. He portrays a Hamlet that is almost constantly at the extremes, and nothing shows that more than the transformation that happens during this speech. And then there's Andrew Scott, who portrayed Hamlet in 2017.
to be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them.
Scott speaks the verse beautifully, conversationally. It sounds like he is saying everything for the very first time, that these timeless soliloquies are his unfiltered stream of consciousness, that almost anything might happen. Watching Andrew Scott, one might be forgiven for not being quite sure what line he is going to say next. He manages to somehow make you feel as if, even though some in the audience surely know the soliloquy by heart, that just about anything could come out of his mouth. This is a Hamlet who, for all intents and purposes, is writing as he speaks. When he comes upon the rub, he treats it almost like a volta in a sonnet, turning this contemplation of action into a contemplation of death.
Perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub.
Papa Esidio, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name, provides a very different take. He's perhaps the most traditionally melancholic Hamlet so far. His eyes are glistening to begin the soliloquy, and as he continues to contemplate his death, these glistening eyes break into tears.
Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them.
But that is not to say that Asidio's Hamlet is devoid of anger. He too treats the rub as a cue with which to summon a more proudly wounded version of his Hamlet.
Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause.
There are many iterations of Hamlet that are worth exploring and analyzing, and whether it is Asidio's more melancholic Hamlet or Tennant's frightfully possessed one, they are all inherently Shakespeare. It is the beauty of the role that is so complex that it allows an infinite amount of shades, genders, backgrounds, and interpretations. The questions Hamlet asks are not ones that are limited to a wounded Danish prince, but instead touch on what resides inside us all. Fear, guilt, the will to do what is expected of us, what is demanded of us, and you can almost imagine the trepidation and excitement that every actor or actress who has ever tried to be Hamlet must feel as they get on that dark stage, knowing that in a minute or two they will have to look the audience in the eyes and ask, to be or not to be.